You're listening to the Zealous Podcast. I'm your host, Rocky Snyder. This week I've got Keegan Knoll on as a guest. He's the strength conditioning coach for the Chicago Cubs. We're going to talk all about baseball, obviously all about strength conditioning, and a whole bunch more. And meanwhile, just before we get going, I want to tell you about a couple of courses I'll be teaching, one on the East Coast, one on the West Coast. It's all about implementing foot wedges for improved performance. I'll be at Physio X Physical Therapy Facility January 27th and 28th. That's in Needham, Massachusetts, right outside of Boston. And then the next weekend, February 3rd and 4th, well, I'll be in California, Capitola, California at Rehab Fitness Conditioning. You can find out more information on my website, RockySnyder.com. While you're at it, follow us on Instagram at Rocky_Snyder. Click the subscribe button and enjoy the show. Okay, well, we're just going to get right into it. I know spring training's coming up in a matter of months and so on, so we're a little off season right now with baseball, but heck, what a better time to capture one of the pros behind the scenes. And this week, Keegan, welcome. And thank you, Chicago Cubs organization. This is going to be great. I'm looking forward to this conversation. First of all, Keegan, welcome to Zealous, and let's just kick it right off. Like, how did you get to be with the Cubs? Because I know you grew up in Illinois, so you're living the dream right now. How did that happen?
Yeah, no, I grew up just outside of Chicago, so super cool to be working with the Cubs. I grew up a Cubs fan, but yeah, the path was kind of just interesting. So I went out to Los Angeles and interned at Exos. I ended up going back out to Los Angeles a couple of months later and working briefly with them there, and that kind of got me out in Southern California. I ended up going and working at Long Beach State with the baseball program over there, and
Great baseball program.
yeah, so really cool experience. Met a ton of good people. A lot of people I'm still close with today. Uh, and that kind of led me over to the Cubs. A job position had opened up, and we had some former Long Beach State alum that were working in the Cubs organization, and got my foot in the door. And so this is I think my sixth year. Just finished my sixth year with the Cubs. Started off one of the minor league affiliates, and now the last 4 years have been up in Chicago with the major league team.
Yeah, so it wasn't like you just got recruited as the head strength coach of the Chicago Cubs. You worked your way up through the organization. So what was that? Okay, here's the question. Right now, you're dealing with the elite of the elite in terms of baseball, and the minors. There's more room for improvement. In fact, I've spoken to a few of your colleagues in the MILB, and they love it there because there's so much they get to do with the athletes to bring them up to that next level. And once they're up at that next level, well, then it's just these minor fine tuning positions. Do you see that? I mean, was that your experience? And if it is, do you like doing the fine tuning stuff?
You know what? It was a cool transition going from college into the minor leagues, just because both are heavily involved in development. The difference with college and minor leagues is when you're working with a college program, the need to win is always right now. So it's like you're constantly in this state of like development but need to win. And that's cool. I mean, you have a sense of urgency around that. And when you go to the minor leagues, there's this sense of like you are trying to develop each one of these guys to be big leaguers at some point and contribute to the big league team. So it's a little bit of a different process, but really cool nonetheless. I mean, it's super rewarding to get to take people that have so much ability and talent, and just feed that development. And it's really evolved in our organization, and I think it's in baseball in general. Strength and conditioning is the teams have placed a lot more importance in like the physical development of all these athletes. So more money has been put in and investment in that whole process. And we've really started to see the benefits of that here. So that's been really cool. Depending on the organization, like ours, for example, has had a number of young prospects come up in the last couple of years to our major league team. And so that's pretty neat. But there's typically with some of those young guys still some room to develop. So although you are fine tuning some things here and there, like they still have some of these guys still have a bit of a window to develop, and you need to be mindful of that just to try to maximize, what you can get out of each of those guys. But so some of the guys that have been around a little bit, the process of fine tuning things is a lot of like helping them manage their routines and making sure they're staying on track and tweaking little things here and there. And that's a lot of fun too. It's definitely a lot different, but it's kind of their own unique challenges. So.
And then, so being as the head strength conditioning coach for the Cubs, how many assistants do you have that are on your team?
So we actually, so right now we have two major league strength coaches in Chicago. So we went away from having like a head and an assistant. We have two major league strength coaches. The other one, he's with me here in Arizona in the off season, and both of us are in Chicago during the season. So he's been with the organization for I think 14 years. He's been at every single affiliate. He's done it all. He's a true Cub, that's for sure.
Wow. And so obviously with that experience comes a lot of shared knowledge. So with the two of you there, how does it break down? Do you guys just work kind of in a patchwork manner where you're going to take these players, he's going to take these players, or how do you guys coordinate that?
You know what? We've known each other for the last 6 years, and we spent a lot of time together, just even in the off season. We're super close, so we really feed off each other super well. It's a really good situation that I get to be in, having him along there with me, just because we know each other so well. So we don't really have any designated splitting things up. We both we sit down and meet every single day. We're talking constantly. We have really good communication, and we know what needs to get done. And we also know that both of us are going to get pulled in different directions throughout the day. There's naturally just players that gravitate towards one of us or the other that we might work a little bit more with. So we kind of know if, okay, during the day, one of us needs to be here at some point. Okay, I'm going to take this today. You take this today. And then as players are kind of coming and going in the weight room, we're kind of just feeding off of each other and making sure that everything gets done. And it sounds unsmooth, but it's the process for us that works really well, just because of the fact that we communicate so well. So.
Well, that makes all the difference. Now, are you guys also overseeing minors, A's, triple A's, and so on?
We have so we hired a director a little over a year ago. He oversees the entire department. So he oversees us and then minor leagues there as well. And then we have a minor league coordinator who oversees all the affiliate strength coaches. So we've got numbers in terms of like our staff. The Cubs, we're lucky. The Cubs have invested into this department and placed a lot of good people here, and so we've been lucky to have a lot of support from a number of people to make sure that things are running smoothly, things are getting done, that we're leaving no box unchecked, and it's been really helpful in the development of some of these young guys that are coming up, and making sure that by the time they get to Chicago, they're physically ready to go.
Yeah, right on. Okay, so I'm just thinking, I grew up outside of Boston, so we're both with storied teams, right? And both coincidentally went on a many decades long drought of having a World Series, obviously over 80 years the Sox and even more with the Cubs. So for me, 2004 was an amazing year. And for you, when the Cubs won the series, I mean, it was just like, this is unbelievable. But what also must have been unbelievable for you, and just like a little personal side story here, was when you set foot in Wrigley as a member of the Cubs organization. Just give me a glimpse of what that was like.
Well, I definitely the first day in 2020 when we went to opening day, I definitely cried on my way there.
Oh man,
it was a pretty cool experience. But yeah, it was honestly when all this unfolded and I was leaving Long Beach to come work with the Cubs, like it was just so cool. I had so many people from home that were just like super excited because just a lot of friends and family or Cubs fans and stuff. So the whole thing was cool, but obviously it's business at that point, and you're not showing up as a fan, you're showing up to get a job done and stuff like that. So you learn to just separate all that and everything, but it doesn't take away from just the experience itself. I mean, I've been to a number of games just as a fan, going to Wrigley Field growing up as a kid and stuff, and so to go there and to be a part of opening day that first year was just like it was super special. And so definitely something that I'll never forget. But I enjoy traveling around and getting to see all the different ballparks and getting to meet people, and just continue to gain experiences just in this game. It's been really cool.
And yet, 2020, you mentioned opening day, and then in a matter of weeks or maybe a month or so, not even, uh, COVID starts slamming us down. And but you pivot yourself, and being a top professional who's never satisfied with the level of information or knowledge that you're gaining, you take a path, and now you're enrolled in a master's program. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah. We had just started using force plates and starting to gain traction with technology, and it was about to become a really big part of everything that we were doing. And I just didn't have a ton of experience with it at the time, so I started teaching myself how to code. First I started in Excel. I was following some videos and trying to make this dashboard. And once I figured that out, I was like, okay, I want to be able to do more than this. So I started teaching myself how to use RStudio, which is what I code in now. And it's been a really neat way for me to kind of upskill myself and learn a lot more about how to look at some of the data we're collecting, how to visualize it, how to find significance within it, and be able to make some better decisions. And it's led me to just wanting to take it even a step further. I mean, I've been using it extensively now for the last 4 years, and so now I'm enrolled in a master's program, Victoria University in Australia, and getting to use that stuff and continue to learn a lot more about it. And it's been really cool. I'm super interested in it all, and it's kind of my nerd out. And I'm like you. I want to get in and just pick stuff up and put it down and blast loud music all the time. But when I like to nerd out, that's coding for me.
Right on. Okay, so let's delve into a little sports science then. What, at this point, right now, as we approach the 2024 season, what elements of sports science are you excited about, and that you glean the most data or information from that's going to be applicable to your role?
It's a good question. We have a number of things. We collect quite a bit, and we use quite a bit. And I think that that's probably something that separates us from a lot of organizations. I feel like everybody at this point is on this path and trying to collect more information. I feel like everybody realizes that having this information is helpful. Everybody gets that. So how we get it and how we use it is what's going to separate people. And so we collect a number of force plate metrics and things in the training room with the force frame, um, range of motion assessments, and then we get a number of stuff just from Statcast with Major League Baseball. Um, so how this all interacts, I think, is probably the thing that's the most exciting. We're really diving into some of the workload stuff, and how we can better look at some of like the running and loads on the field, but how that might interact with some of our force plate metrics. And really, we're just trying to get every single guy and get a glimpse of where we're at with them, and be able to steer their training in a direction that's going to make sure that, one, they're staying healthy, but two, that they're performing at their best, especially as we get into playoff push in September, and hopefully this coming year into the playoffs.
Okay, so give me a scenario, basically using the force plates and the on-field um, data collection that you're doing right now. Like, how do they correlate to each other? Are there certain things that you see in regards to the force plate that's going to trigger you to look at on-field performance? And then if you see something there, you're like, oh man, okay, we really need to work on this with this particular player, or they need to go see the PT or the ATC or whatever. Like, is that what you're talking about, or is it something completely different?
So with some of like the StatCast data, like we're trying to make sure. I'll give you an example here. Is like we'll look at, let's just say, somebody who doesn't play every single day. We want to make sure that they're getting enough running so that given they're thrust into a situation where now they're playing every single day, that they've got a chronic buildup that they're going to be able to handle playing the next 10 consecutive days. So we're trying to reduce the risk of potential soft tissue injury by making sure that guys have been built up to appropriate volumes. That we want to make sure guys are hitting high speeds. In baseball, it's such a game of failure that depending on how well you're playing, you might not have an opportunity to showcase like your speed for 2-3 days. In a week you typically will, but we want to make sure that guys are regularly hitting speeds, and if not, we're able to take some of that information and flag it and say, okay, we should probably supplement some high speed running and make sure guys are trying to touch some top speeds here, both as a way to prevent things, but also to make sure from a performance standpoint that guys are hitting top speeds. That's an
So are you so how are you assessing their speeds? Are you doing actually sprints, or are you just looking at how they're performing on the field? I mean, how does that work to know when you have to push, when you have to rest, when you have to change fueling or whatever the case is?
So Statcast gives us all that information. So Statcast gives us
Wow.
Statcast is pretty incredible. So they have uh, they have cameras in every single MLB ballpark, and Hawkeye is what Statcast uses, and it basically computes a number of metrics, whether they're statistical metrics for in-game biomechanical stuff, just player tracking. It's pretty incredible. So there's a number of things that you can get, but in terms of just like the running workloads and stuff, and I know this is something that a number of organizations are diving more and more into and stuff, and trying to figure out. But we in particular, we're definitely looking at making sure these guys are hitting top speeds, making sure they're getting enough running, making sure that they're getting rest when appropriate and stuff like that. The force plates come into play. We try to get guys on there once a week. The consistency of it is important for us, just so that um, we can see significance a lot better and we can see trends a lot better if we're getting them regularly versus going 3 weeks without getting any. It just becomes a little less significant to us, but that can be from a performance standpoint or a fatigue standpoint. I mean, you could look at it a number of ways and looking at some different metrics, but we have a few that we kind of dive in on that'll give us some insight into whether a guy is becoming fatigued or whether or not our program is doing what it's supposed to be doing. Once we get in season, it's a matter of monitoring how much guys are doing and making sure they're doing the right things so that we don't dig them into a hole, especially if they're a guy that's going out there and trying to play 155 games.
Yeah, well, I can see, like, I'm thinking positionally. Like, you've got your infield and your outfielders that are going to have, well, outfielders obviously substantial more distance covered, and you can really look at their sprint repeats, uh, and potentially the infield to some degree. But I'm also thinking, well, pitcher, you guys are in the Nationals, so there's going to be times where the pitcher is going to be running bases and so on. But the catcher, I guess my attention's going to the catcher. Catcher is basically in a box, and the only time you're going to see metrics is if that catcher has a decent batting average, right, and gets some hits, right, and so
Sure.
I guess lower body power is kind of what we're talking about. I mean, total body power, but is there something in the gym setting? Are you doing something in the gym with the force plates to make up for the fact that some of these players out on the field, you're not going to see them with a lot of linear acceleration? You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, for sure. There's definitely different positional demands. I mean, different positions are built differently, and
Sure.
they definitely require different things.
But
So
datacast, I mean, datacast will show, I'm sure, pitching speed and all that from the pitcher, but when it comes to sustaining like um, sprinting speed, we're not going to get that from them. So what do you get?
the catchers are definitely probably the position that we're least worried about with respect to their sprinting speed. It's a plus if they got some of it, but managing their position is definitely the priority in that, and making sure that they're healthy. But the force plates, that's where the force plates come in. Is it's counter movement jumps. We're doing isometric belt squats for a strength test. We're trying to get once a month, and looking at the interaction of some of the force plate metrics. There's a ton of things that they spit out, and like I said, we try to key on a few things that we believe are important, with both like looking at fatigue, so we can make sure if we do see that somebody's fatigued, we might say, hey, we want to try to get you into the training room after the game and make sure we use some modalities from a recovery standpoint, or we're just going to pull back in this area. We're always looking for ways where on our end we can pull back or promote recovery, so that these guys have the opportunity to be out there as many games as possible. That's always our goal.
And we're talking, what is it? I can never remember. Is 164? How many games in the season?
162.
62. It's always something like that. All right. That's a lot of games.
It's a lot of games.
That's a lot of adjusting. Are you doing this on a daily basis, or is it all depending upon the game schedule? Like when do you look at all your players and go, okay, we're going to need to push him, we're going to need to hold him back, we're going to need to check on his rest, or whatever. Like how deep into the minutia are you getting, and how frequently are you doing it?
It's every single day, and it requires a lot of communication. So the communication is really the biggest thing. So we obviously have a lot of data at our disposal. The grunt work is trying to get it, and how we handle it all. But as long as we're able to organize it and put it in one place, every day we can just look through everything. So our other strength coach and myself, we'll sit down and we'll have a meeting every single day, first thing before the day starts, and we'll go through, okay, what needs to get done today? Where do we need to be at what times? Boom, boom, boom. What guys are on our radar with things? What do we need to make sure we get done with them? And then we'll have a medical meeting, and we'll talk with our entire medical staff, from our medical director, our physical therapist, all of our athletic trainers, nutritionists, and we'll all sit down and we'll go over the day in terms of like, okay, injury report, what else needs to get done with us as a whole group. So there's already just 2 meetings to start the day, and they're not super long, but they make sure that if there's anything on our radar that we need to talk about, or anything that gets brought up within that, now all of a sudden we start to formulate kind of a plan for the day. And outside of that, there's constant communication with the rest of our coaching staff. I mean, the rest of the groups, pitching is getting so much information on each of these athletes in game. So our R&D does an incredible job with looking at like all the pitching metrics, from the actual pitches themselves, the biomechanical stuff. So there's a ton that goes into that our pitching guys are handling. So communication with them is just constant. They're constantly coming in and out of the weight room and talking to us. Hey, this is what we're working on because this is what we're seeing. We want to make sure that in the weight room, you guys can complement that. So that already stirs the pot for us. So, okay, now we've got this on our radar. We can complement pitching with this. And the same goes for hitting. That's just kind of an example. But I think the biggest thing is the communication channels, and making sure that we have the right people in place that, egos aside, are willing to collaborate and find ways to talk, so that we can give these guys the best opportunities to play at their best every day.
All right. You mentioned how you really love geeking out on sports science and data and technology. And of course, baseball is the sport when you think of statistics. And so, Keegan, how do you not drown in information overload? How do you sift through the stuff that's not essential, that seems to be something that you might want to look at, but you're able to sift through it to get to what you really need? Obviously, it's a practice and a discipline, but do you have any insight into that, or is it just come naturally? You're like, oh, I just obviously kind of look at that and say, oh, and then I'm just scratching my head over here going, I think I'll just go lift some dumbbells. I have no idea what he's talking about.
It's definitely been a process. I mean, it's the ongoing evolution of how best to use this stuff. I think, like I said, we're lucky to have an R&D group that does an incredible job sifting through a lot of stuff and making sense of a lot of stuff for us. So as more and more information comes in, they're constantly giving us good feedback of what's important and how we should look at stuff. So, and that goes for a number of things. That goes for a lot of the pitching metrics, a lot of the hitting metrics, some of the biomechanical stuff. And we're constantly just learning more information. So between that and then putting together, dashboards that, show trends with significance behind them, the more that we just, have that context is really what it is. There's so much that goes on in the day, and, data is not going to tell you everything because, we're playing 162 games. We're traveling every couple of days. We're going to different time zones. Guys are away from their families, then they're with their families. They might have a baby. But there's a number of things just in life that aren't going to pop up on data. So it's all just context, right? Like, and the better relationships that we can have with these guys and understand what's going on in their lives and their different stresses. We don't do any sort of questionnaires or anything like that, but talking with guys is a form of a questionnaire and gaining their trust and getting feedback from them. So in conjunction with just, listening, understanding some of that, and then sifting through some of the significance of the metrics that we like, things start to become a lot clearer, and we're able to make some better educated decisions on when to push, when to pull back, stuff like that.
What are the metrics that you like?
So just a couple from like a force plate standpoint. We look at peak power. We look at concentric impulse. We use the Volve force plate. So we look at P1 and P2 concentric impulse. P1 is basically the first part of the push when you're coming back up. The P2 is the last push off essentially there before they take off. So we'll look at those. Counter movement depth is another one that we've been looking into, and this is just more strategy with like their jump, and if they're starting to deviate from the strategy, it's something that we want to be aware of. And then RSI is definitely one that we'll look at just in terms of like fatigue and stuff like that. So we try to keep it simple. There's a number of other metrics there's a million metrics this thing spits out. When we're keeping it at kind of the most basic level, looking at that, and then we're doing some strength testing on there as well, where we're just looking at peak force, just using a variation of like the IMTP with just an isometric belt squat. So we're looking at that, and then like I said, we have. We want to simplify it as much as possible. Obviously, we want to make sure that we capture the things that we feel really strongly about. But there's so much out there between departments and everything else that we're trying to look at the most complete picture in the most efficient way possible as well. So,
And has there been enough data collection compared with, say, injury incident rate to correlate a good prediction model for when you're looking at these force plate results, outcomes with each athlete, comparing it, say, to other metrics? It creates a yellow or red flag going, oh, wait a minute. Okay. You know what I'm saying? Like if we're looking at groin pull, hamstring, Achilles issue, rotator cuff, elbow, whatever we're talking about, right? Has that developed enough? Have we gotten enough information where we can home in on a little bit more accuracy as the likelihood of injury for this player based on all that?
I think we're trying to get to that place, as I think everybody is. I think everybody wants to when we get there.
But we're not there yet. We're not there yet.
No, and I think it's what's tricky is it's a combination of things. You just want to be aware of flags, like you want to be aware of things that are outside of the norm. So that's where we're looking at some of like the workload, like the running data in game. I think that's where we're like starting to gain some steam and in monitoring some of like the acute chronics and things like that, where we're starting to look at spikes in their workloads on the field. Obviously there's a number of things because guys are doing early work and they might be taking a lot of infield work before a game or batting practice, whatever. There's a lot of stuff even before the game. But in the training room too, we're doing shoulder cuff testing and hip cuff testing on the force frame. And so if you start to see something in one of these areas, is typically a sign to dive into some other areas. And so that's where having a team of people that can can assist in this process of looking at this. So somebody has a faulty hip cuff measurement and weak groin or something like that, and we have the ability then to maybe look at some deeper things with maybe some asymmetries in their counter movement jumps, or just the counter movement depth changes in their strategy, and see if maybe like somebody's becoming fatigued. And like I said, we have a team of people because we have such an extensive R&D group, and we've got a team of people just even on our S&C side that can help out with this. And that communication channel just becomes that much more important because, when the day's flying by and you've got a lot of things on your plate and you're starting to notice some things, you can just make a phone call, shoot a text message, and you could have a number of people diving deeper into some of this stuff for you just instantly. So I wouldn't say there's like a clear cut model that's telling us things at this point, but there's definitely things that we're looking at where we start to have some conversations and we're able to catch things ahead of time just because of the fact that we're communicating well and recognizing things. So
yeah, I wouldn't doubt that as sports science evolves, we're going to see a reduction in injuries just based on a prediction model or two. But okay, in your training facility, you've got vast resources. I can only imagine the toy box that you call your training facility. If the IRS were to come and seize almost every property, which are the ones that you would say, no, you're not taking this over my cold dead body? What are the ones in that room that you're like, this, you could have everything else, but leave me these things?
Wow, that's a good question. That's tough. Probably depends on the time of the year, honestly.
Well, why? What do you say that for?
Well, in the off season, we love to use the 1080 sprint. As I like to use as much as we can, especially if we have position players here that make their money's worth sprinting. That I love that tool. It's incredible. But I would probably take something that's just the most efficient that you can do the most things on. Like something like the K pulleys. You can do so much different lower body, upper body, core stuff. Kettlebells you could do a ton of stuff with. TRX. I mean, things that are just big bang for your buck. Probably, I'd say leave those. But if it's in our weight room, we use it. We've just in the 4 years that I've been in Chicago, that weight room has shuffled a whole bunch, because if we stop using something, like we're typically starting to try to use something else and we're switching it out, like putting it into storage, and we might go grab it again later. But if it's in that weight room, people are using it. So
I love your answer. I love it because you're saying, hey, we just stick with the basics. We don't have to have anything fancy, anything electronic necessarily. It doesn't have to be a lot of hydraulics here and there. Give me some kettlebells, give me an open field, and give me a cable system, maybe some bands. Sure. Yeah, that's all you need. Take the rest. Okay, how about this? I've been, as you can tell, right over my shoulder, I've got some Indian clubs. I love swinging those. They've saved my shoulders on numerous occasions due to the years and years of paddling out there in the surf and just tearing it up. What about clubs and maces? Do you guys use that very much with your players?
We have them.
They're the ones in the closet that no one's using?
No, they're not. We have them out. We actually, so we typically, if a guy uses some piece of equipment regularly, like every day, we will make every effort to make sure that it comes on the road with us. Because we're on the road half the year. And if it's part of a guy's routine, like we'll make every effort that we can to try to make sure it comes with us. We bring a travel trunk on the road with us. Yeah, I'll get to my point with the Indian clubs. But for example, we have a guy who uses a sled every single day, does backward sled walks. Part of his routine. We pack that sled with us every single time we go on the road. And first thing we do is we set it up. But we had a player this past year who was religious about the Indian clubs, and so we brought an extra pair so we could just bring them on the road with us in the trunk. So the things like that sometimes are just dependent on the guy. Like some of these guys have so many different experiences from coming through college or playing with another organization where they've picked things up and they like to do certain things in their training, and we're obviously respectful of stuff like that. So if they're bought into it and it works for them, then we want to make sure that we do everything we can to support that. And so the Indian clubs, like I don't personally have a ton of experience with them. I don't typically program stuff for them just because I don't have a extensive background with them. But the other strength coach we have is a little more familiar with them. He'll do some stuff with those Indian clubs, and a couple of our players do. So we'll use them. Same with the mace. I like to mess around with the mace. We have them here in Arizona, so I like to mess around with those. I think those are pretty fun.
Right on. Okay, and not to. I hope that this isn't going to be directed at any particular player, and because I'm that's not what this is about. But okay, are Indian clubs the most off the wall tool? They are like, oh man, this guy uses it. We got to get him. Or is there something else? Is it just like the what was that? The shake weight. Do you have a shake weight too?
We don't have any shake weights. I hope nobody brings in the shake weight, but
No tug toner, nothing like that. But are
no,
there?
there's all sorts of stuff that comes in. We had somebody bring in the knees over toes guys captured the audience of a bunch of guys, and so somebody bought one of those tib things. You know what I'm talking
Oh,
about? The
yeah.
little tib weight that you just put on your feet. Somebody bought one of those the other year. We've got one of those now. It hasn't been used in the last year, but like that's probably the most outside the boxing that we have. And it's, I wouldn't say it's not useful. I mean, like there's guys that have gotten use out of it, but it doesn't get used a ton.
Sure.
Um,
Everything has a time and a place, right?
for sure. And like I said, if something hasn't been touched in a year, it's going into storage because we're trying to keep the space as good as we can with what we have, till we get more space.
Okay. And so if Christmas is around the corner here, do you have anything on a list for Santa when it comes to your training room?
Ooh, well, we're always looking for better we're trying to clear the space out a little bit, so different means of storage. Like I think we're looking for some different bar storage and foam roll storage and things like that. I know that sounds like a weird wish list, but I like the space to be open and clean, and um, the space is limited. Especially Wrigley. Wrigley's
Yeah.
an old stadium, so we don't have a ton of space. So the space that we have, we want to make sure that guys have room to get on the ground and prep and not be crowded and overwhelmed by just clutter and stuff like that. So we're always looking for ways that we can, with the stuff that we do believe that we want, there's a fine line. Can we bring it to storage? Well, if we're going to use it, we're not bringing it to storage. So the stuff that's in there, like I said, the stuff that's in there we're using. And at some
Wait a
point,
minute. Your main training facility is at Wrigley itself?
yeah. So every major league stadium has a home side and a visiting side weight room.
Well, yeah, I knew that, but for some reason, there was this thought outside my head that you've actually got a complex outside. It was somewhere in the Chicago area or in the suburbs that you train the majority of your players, but you actually do it right there at Wrigley.
Yeah, right there, at Wrigley.
Okay.
Yeah,
Wow.
it's nice too. It's definitely nice. I'd always probably argue we could use more space. Everybody would probably say
Yeah.
the same. But as far as like the layout of it and everything, it got redone in 2020, and it's super nice. We're very lucky for what we've got, but we also try to maximize that space best we can. So Christmas list, looking for ways to
Open space.
store some things.
Got it. Okay, so that's great because that I love that too. I feel like my training facility is close to being like a submarine where there's a specific spot for everything because you only have so much room. So you gotta really be as efficient as possible. And plus, to have open room to move, it leads me to this next question. Most of the loading, the lifts, the main lifts are obviously primarily sagittal plane and bilateral. We can get unilateral movements and so on, but do you use that space for loading non-traditional patterns like multi-planar or frontal or transverse plane action? How much of your strength program incorporates some of those elements?
A lot, actually. We've really gone. I mean, granted, they're the guys that are young and make it to the big leagues and are still in that window of development. There might be some of those guys who are still pushing to try to get stronger. I mean, not that we're not trying to get everybody stronger, especially in the off season. Everybody we're trying to get stronger, you know. However, we we do feel really strong that keeping guys healthy across a season like that, you need to have some movement variety. So all of our programs, off season and in season, have a big emphasis on exploring and moving in different planes, and we feel like it's been really big for us in just the management of uh, reducing any incidents of injuries that we've had. So, and we had a lot of success this past year. Knock on wood. With we had a pretty good year with injuries and stuff like that. So, but we try to be in multiple planes every training session.
Nice. And of course, the load will vary based on the movement itself. Maybe there'll be just body weight, but then you're going to load into it. Am I on the right path with that?
Yeah, well, we do a lot of things with the cable columns that we're able to. We've got water bags that we'll do a lot of different stuff with, kettlebells, um, body weight stuff. There's landmines. There's a lot of different ways that we'll get in and hit multiple planes of things. But we really like to get into different lunging patterns, different dynamic lunging patterns. We like using the K pulleys. That's been really cool with some of this stuff. So, like I said, different reaching, pressing in different ways with either the landmine or the cable has been really, really good for us. And there's a ton of variations and stuff that we're able to utilize. So
That's cool. Keegan, when does your day begin? When does it end? What's your typical work day looking like?
Depends on the time of year. During the season is at home, get there and try to get a workout in before everybody shows up. But we'll typically have a meeting, probably like for a night game, like 1:30, and the game would start at 7, like a 7 o'clock game, and then probably have guys lift after the game, a couple of them, and probably get out of there by 11:30. If we have a day game, like we might roll one of those days into a day game, and so you might have to be back there if you want to get a workout in like 7:30 to workout in, probably a meeting at 9, and then game at 1:20. You're probably out of there by 5:30. So it's pretty depends. We play a lot of day games at Wrigley Field, so the schedule at home can be crazy because you can have a night game right into a day game pretty often. But when we're on the road, usually just getting on the first bus, because we'll usually have a player or two that's getting on there that wants to come in and do some early work. So getting on the first bus and probably taking the last bus back. But in the off season, it's completely flipped. The off season it's nice. I'm usually going to bed early. I'm waking up at like 5:30, coming in a workout, some breakfast, and then players that we have are probably rolling in about 8:39 and getting all of their stuff done and out by noon. So
in Arizona, they're meeting you there.
Mm-hmm.
Nice. And then they'll stay there until the Cactus League picks up. When does that start?
That'll start in February. More guys will usually start rolling in after the new year, just slowly just start coming in. So
okay, so I guess this is going to be one of my final questions because we're coming up near the end of this conversation here. I have found over the years that caregivers, those that are giving care to others, are not necessarily the best caretakers of themselves. So here you are, top pro with the Cubs. You're monitoring all these athletes to make sure they're going in the direction you want them to try to get to that we'll call peak performance, for lack of a better term. Do you do the same thing with you? You already mentioned you work out, but how much of your own personal metrics do you look at? I don't want to throw you under the bus here, but I'm just kind of curious.
You know what? I wear this. This is probably the most monitoring I do. I wear a Whoop band. It holds me accountable to try to get good sleep. That's about.
And So that is probably the biggest thing is like, how is your sleep patterns? I mean, between off season to preseason to in season, it is going to be all over the freaking place. What is that like?
Oh yeah, as a couple of the guys would say, I live in the jaws of red with my whoop scores. I live in the jaws of red, but you know what? Found a way to thrive in the jaws of red. So, um, no, it's you know what? That's about it. This holds me accountable to stuff. Like, there's little things like um timing of like before you go to bed with like eating or drinking anything, and like I know that affects your sleep a ton. So I've been more conscious of that just from wearing this, and like it definitely does hold me accountable to trying to get enough sleep. Um, so that's pretty good, but I'm a big routine guy. So uh, whether we're in season or not, I try to have some element of a routine that's like a staple for me that I just is good for me. You know, like I'll do there's probably the thing the most outside the box that I do. I do Wim Hof breathing every day. I started doing
Dude,
it. I started doing it a couple of years ago because we had a couple players that were doing it, and they got me really bought into all this stuff, and I started doing it, and honestly it was crazy. It blew my mind, but my HRVs on this started going way up as soon as I started doing that. And so I was like, I just kind of bought into it, and it's part of my routine every day. But I have stuff in the morning that I like to do. Like I'll get up and go through a little movement routine every single day, whether I'm home or in a hotel on the road. And I try to stick with that. That's like my self care is like just my routine.
right on. Oh man, well that's good. That's good because you got to keep strong and healthy for all those around you. Keegan, this has been
For
great.
sure.
I can't thank you enough for coming on and sharing all this insight and what you've been doing with the Cubs organization. Obviously, good luck with this upcoming season. If people want to follow you, can I put the LinkedIn link and or do you have an Instagram handle that you use that we could share?
Yeah, by all means, LinkedIn for sure. And I don't even know what my Instagram handle is. I don't post much on my Instagram. I do have one, and every once in a while I'll post some stuff on my stories. But people are definitely able to reach out. I think it's just my name. I think it's just Keegan Knoll is probably the handle.
Uh, all right. Well, they can go on a treasure hunt and try and find you that way.
I,
I'll leave
I
that one
I-
up.
I'm
But
I'm I'm always trying to be more active on it, and I'm trying.
no worries. Thanks again. I really appreciate it. And that's another episode in the books. I hope you enjoyed Zella's podcast. I want to thank Keegan and the Cubs organization for allowing this to happen. Remember, if you're looking for continuing education, you can click into my website, rockysnyder.com. We've got some online courses available, some free, some at cost, and also in-person courses that are going to be offered at the end of January, beginning of February in Massachusetts and California. Check the website for more information. Until next week, go out there and make it a good one.